4 gunshots ripped through the champagne-soaked elegance of Seoul's Skylight Gala. A server's platter of canapés exploded against marble because he was never a server. His target wasn't the crime lord making backroom deals. It was his estranged 6-year-old daughter, abandoned by the buffet like forgotten luggage. And between that suppressed pistol and the girl stood the one person everyone overlooked, Chloe Winslet, the black secretary they treated like furniture, the woman hired to schedule meetings and vanish. She didn't hesitate. She wrapped herself around the child like a human shield. Metal tore through fabric, then flesh. 4 bullets. 4 explosions of agony that shredded her spine and lungs as she became a wall of bone and will between death and innocence. In a single heartbeat, the ballroom discovered that the invisible woman was a weapon in disguise. And Yoonwoo, the man who ruled the Jeumdo syndicate with an iron fist, was about to realize he'd been sitting across from a ghost for 8 months. If that moment already grabbed you, hit that like button. Tell us where you're watching from and stay to see what happens when Yoonwoo discovers who Chloe Winslet really is. The moment Chloe Winslet stepped into Jeumdo Tower, she understood the rules of invisibility. Not literal her presence, her skin, her height made her impossible to miss in Seoul's corporate underworld. But there's a particular art powerful people master, looking through someone rather than at them, making you present and erased simultaneously. For 8 months, she'd been nothing more than Yoonwoo's black secretary. 8 months of fetch this and handle that in flawless Korean that shocked people once, then became expected. 8 months of organizing meetings where fortunes changed hands, some transactions legal, most drenched in blood money. 8 months of watching, cataloging, hunting the man responsible for, but I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand what it's like to be treated as furniture with a pulse. CIA training? Irrelevant. Former special ops background? Unmentioned. The fact that Chloe could disassemble a Glock in 12 seconds, spoke 6 languages fluently, and had a photographic memory that had once cracked an international arms ring. Merely a curiosity when Yoonwoo needed to intimidate foreign associates. A well-trained show dog performing on command. There's a particular brand of fury that ferments when you're simultaneously indispensable and invisible. When you're the only one who remembers security protocols, offshore account numbers, and which lieutenant has a gambling problem yet no one remembers your actual name. Hey, you. The American woman. Or most cutting. Nothing at all. Just a snap of manicured fingers. A dismissive wave. In those moments, Chloe would feel the rage coiling in her chest. A living thing that had driven her halfway across the world to this tower of glass and secrets. The same rage that burned the night she found her fiancé's body dumped in an alley with a Jeumdo calling card in his pocket. But she swallowed it down, buried it beneath neutral expressions and perfect posture. Used it as fuel for the long game she was playing. Because invisibility, she'd learned in Langley, was also power. The power to move unnoticed. To photograph documents left carelessly open. To overhear confessions people wouldn't make if they remembered you existed. That Friday evening at the Skylight Charity Gala, Chloe stood 3 paces behind Yoonwoo as always watching the room while her boss charmed Seoul's elite. The ballroom glittered with power. Chaebols, politicians, K-pop royalty, all orbiting Yoonwoo like moths around a flame. Not just any flame, a inferno that consumed anyone who approached without offering something of value. Yo Hae-won, Yoonwoo's 6-year-old daughter, looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. Unlike her father, who commanded every room he entered, Hae-won stood isolated by the dessert buffet, tugging at her crimson gown like it was made of razor blades. She hadn't wanted to come. Chloe had overheard her pleading that morning, but Yoonwoo insisted. Optics matter, he'd said coldly, even for a man who trafficked in violence and fear. Chloe had watched Hae-won for 8 months, watched her shrink from her father's rare explosions of temper, watched her face fall when he canceled their dinners for business emergencies, watched her eyes light up the one time he'd actually acknowledged her academic achievements. She noticed these things because no one else seemed to. Not the household staff. Not the private tutors. Certainly not Yoonwoo himself. Chloe noticed the security breach immediately. 5 of Yoonwoo's men clustered at the main entrance. 2 monitoring the VIP corridor. 0 with clear sightlines to Hae-won. A blind spot the size of a crater. She'd flagged it twice in security briefings, only to be dismissed by the head of Yoonwoo's detail. The secretary should stick to coffee runs, he'd sneered in Korean, assuming she wouldn't understand the full contempt in his tone. The casual racism had stung less than the dismissal of a legitimate tactical concern. How many times had she seen danger approaching while others looked away? How many times had her warnings been ignored? When the first shot cracked through the symphony of conversation, time shattered into fragments of pure instinct. The server, not a server at all, dropping his tray, hand diving inside his vest. Suppressed pistol emerging, barrel swinging not toward Yoonwoo, but toward his daughter. Haewon frozen mid-reach for a chocolat eclair, confusion blooming across her face. A lamb unaware of the slaughter. And Chloe already moving, already calculating angles and velocity, already knowing what 4 bullets would feel like punching through tissue that was never meant to stop them. The first round hit her left shoulder, a supernova that spun her half around. The second tore through her lower back, white-hot agony that nearly folded her in half. The third and fourth caught her chest as she wrapped herself around Haewon, shielding the girl's body with her own. Both of them crashing behind the buffet table in a tangle of limbs, blood, and shattered porcelain. Pain isn't adequate language for what comes next. It's an entire dimension of suffering that erases thought. Your body becomes a traitor. Every nerve shrieking information your brain rejects. Chloe had been shot before Fallujah, a through and through that left a scar on her calf, but nothing like this. This was drowning in napalm. This was every cell simultaneously fighting to survive and surrender. Through the haze, Chloe registered Haewon's terrified face hovering above hers, small hands pressing desperately against the wounds, trying to hold Chloe's life inside her body, tears falling like rain as she screamed for her father in broken Korean. The chaos erupting as security finally neutralized the threat. And then Yoonwoo's face appeared, that mask of calculated control cracked wide open by something Chloe had never witnessed there. Raw, unfiltered terror. Not for himself, for his daughter. And then, impossibly, for the woman bleeding out on his behalf. "Stay with me," Yoonwoo commanded in Korean, as if Chloe's fading consciousness would obey like every other order. "Why would you—" He couldn't finish. Chloe tried to speak. Tried to explain it was just training, just muscle memory, just being in the wrong place at the right time. But all that escaped was blood. She wanted to say so many things in that crystalline moment about the evidence she'd been gathering in his private files, about her real reason for accepting this position, about her fiancé, about how, despite everything, she'd grown to care for this quiet, lonely girl now sobbing over her broken body. The last thing she heard before darkness swallowed her was Haewon's voice, fracturing with desperation. "Father, please don't let her die. Please." She saw the gun when no one else did. She saw what no one else saw. The irony wasn't lost on Chloe as consciousness slipped away. For once, the invisible woman had been the only one truly watching. If those 4 bullets shocked you, hit that like button right now. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe for the jaw-dropping moment that comes next when Yoonwoo realizes who Chloe Winslet really is. Chloe Winslet should have died on the ballroom floor of the Skylight Gala. 4 bullets at close range, severed spinal nerves, collapsed lung, the kind of damage that fills morgue drawers, not recovery wards. But Yoonwoo hadn't built the Gyeomdo Syndicate by accepting fate. While Seoul's best trauma surgeons fought to keep his secretary alive, Yoonwoo was waging a different war against the truth. In a private hospital waiting room, blood still staining his $1,000 suit, he scrolled through the personnel file he should have examined 8 months ago, the file that would change everything. 8 months earlier, Chloe Winslet stood in the lobby of Gyeomdo Tower holding a resume scrubbed so clean it could pass a polygraph. On paper, she was overqualified and underwhelming, a former corporate liaison with language skills and administrative experience. Nothing that would make Yoonwoo's people look twice. Nothing that would make them look at all. The interview lasted 7 minutes. Yoonwoo's HR director, a sharp-faced woman named Mrs. Baek, barely glanced at her credentials before sliding them across the desk like contaminated evidence. "Your Korean is adequate," she said in English, the implicit message clear. "We'll speak your language since you're here. You understand Mr. Yoon's schedule is demanding. He requires someone who can blend into the background, Someone who won't cause disruptions. Chloe understood perfectly. Someone invisible. Someone disposable. She got the job. The first week, nobody used her name. "You there" became her primary identifier, followed closely by the American, and when they thought she couldn't hear, the black one. She fetched coffee in cups she wasn't allowed to drink from. She organized files she wasn't supposed to read. She stood in corners during meetings where men discussed shipments and territories and problems that needed eliminating, all while pretending she was part of the furniture. Furniture with a pulse, as one lieutenant joked after 3 shots of soju. The others laughed. Chloe smiled and refilled their glasses, her face a perfect mask while her mind photographed the shipping manifests left carelessly open on the conference table. Yunwoo treated her like a voice-activated appliance. Coffee. Black. Now. Not please, never thank you. Just expectations delivered in clipped Korean, followed by dismissal. She learned his schedule, his preferences, his patterns. She learned which files he locked and which he assumed were safe, because who would suspect the secretary of being anything other than what she appeared? The racism was almost refreshingly honest. Mrs. Beck's assistant once asked if she could touch Chloe's hair, then did it anyway without waiting for permission. Security guards addressed her in exaggerated, slow Korean as if volume and simplicity could bridge some imagined gap. During a company dinner, a drunk executive asked Eunwoo if "your girl could dance," then seemed genuinely confused when Chloe simply walked away. But the erasure cut deeper than slurs. It was being in a room where decisions were made and being so thoroughly dismissed that they discussed criminal operations as if she were a lamp. It was watching Eunwoo's lieutenant, Park, input the new security codes on the vault while she stood 3 feet away, holding his coffee, invisible enough that he didn't bother shielding the keypad. 7, 4, 2, 9, #*8, 3. She memorized it along with everything else. Account numbers, shell company names, the hierarchy of who reported to whom. The name of the man who'd been in charge of Southern District operations 2 years ago, before he mysteriously vanished right around the time her fiancé's body was found with a Jeomdo card in his pocket. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of manufactured invisibility was armor. It was access. It was the long game. Chloe Winslet had learned patience in Langley. She could wait 8 months. She could wait 8 years if necessary, because furniture sees everything. And eventually, furniture remembers. The vinyl chair in Seoul National Hospital's private wing was designed for anxiety, not comfort. Eunwoo had sat in it for 6 hours, blood dried to rust on his shirt cuffs, while surgeons fought to keep his secretary alive. Not his secretary. That was the problem crystallizing in his mind with each passing minute. He'd never known who she actually was. The tablet in his hands displayed a file that shouldn't exist. His head of intelligence, Mr. Cho, had pulled strings Eunwoo didn't know he had, calling in favors from contacts in foreign agencies. What came back was a document so heavily redacted it looked like a crossword puzzle designed by paranoid spies. But the parts visible were enough to make his blood run cold. Winslet, Chloe M., former operative, Central Intelligence Agency. Tactical Operations Division, 6 years active service. Deployment history, classified, classified, classified. The black bars marched down the page like body bags. Specialized training in counterintelligence, deep cover operations, advanced marksmanship, hand-to-hand combat, interrogation resistance. Eunwoo scrolled further. Commendations redacted. Discharge reason redacted. Current status, inactive. The word felt like a lie. There was nothing inactive about a woman who'd calculated bullet trajectory in under a second and moved faster than his 6 professional bodyguards. A grainy photograph showed a younger Chloe in tactical gear somewhere dusty in beige Middle East, probably. Her eyes held the flat, empty expression of someone who'd seen death enough times to become fluent in its language. This wasn't the woman who'd fetched his coffee with apologetic efficiency. This was a weapon in human skin. The medical file attached painted an even stranger picture. Scars consistent with shrapnel wounds. Healed fracture of the left radius. Evidence of advanced field medical training. She'd probably treated her own injuries on multiple occasions. The hospital's initial assessment noted her pain tolerance was abnormal, her vitals suggesting someone accustomed to controlling their own physiology under extreme stress. Yoon-woo thought back to 8 months of interactions. How many times had she stood in his office while he discussed operations that could send him to prison? How many security codes had she seen? How many faces had she memorized? She'd been inside his home. She'd organized his personal files. She knew the names of his children, his mistresses, his accountants. She knew everything. The realization hit him like the bullets that should have killed her. Chloe Winslet had been hunting him. For 8 months, a trained intelligence operative had embedded herself in his organization, and he'd been so blinded by his own prejudice, her race, her gender, her apparent subservience that he'd never looked at her properly. He'd made her invisible by choice, and she'd weaponized that invisibility against him. The question wasn't why she'd taken 4 bullets for Haewon. Operatives were trained to make split-second decisions that served their mission. The question was what her mission had been, and whether saving his daughter had just destroyed it or completed it. Behind the surgical suite doors, machines beeped steadily. His ghost was still alive, and when she woke up, Yoon-woo would finally see her. Chloe's first conscious thought was that morphine was a liar. The drugs promised numbness, but delivered only distance, a thin gauze between her and the fire, consuming her chest and back. Her second thought was that someone was watching her with the intensity of a predator deciding whether its prey was truly dead. She opened her eyes to find Yoon-woo sitting beside her hospital bed, immaculate in a fresh suit, a Sig Sauer P-226 resting casually on his thigh. The gun wasn't pointed at her. It didn't need to be. The message was clear. Gratitude had limits, and hers had just expired. "Your real name is Chloe Winslet," he said in English, his accent precise. Not a question. "Former CIA. Tactical operations. 6 years in the field before you were discharged under circumstances your government finds too sensitive to discuss." He tilted his head, studying her like a forgery he'd just discovered in his collection. "You've been investigating me for 8 months. The question is who sent you?" Chloe's throat felt like broken glass. She managed 2 words. "No one. I don't believe you." Yoon-woo leaned forward, the gun shifting slightly. "The Americans don't deploy ghosts without authorization. The question isn't whether you're here on someone's orders, it's whose. I'm not active." Each word cost her. "Haven't been for 3 years." "Then why?" The question carried genuine confusion beneath the threat. "Why embed yourself in my organization? Why take 4 bullets for my daughter if you're here to destroy me?" Chloe closed her eyes, calculating. She'd prepared a dozen cover stories for this moment, each designed to buy time, to deflect, to survive long enough to complete her mission. But lying required energy she didn't have, and there was something almost refreshing about the truth after 8 months of performance. "I came to be invisible," she said finally. "Your people see what they expect to see. A black woman, foreign, deferential, furniture that schedules meetings and disappears. I knew you'd never actually look at me." "Why?" Yoon-woo repeated, harder this time. "Because 2 years ago your organization killed someone I loved." The words emerged flat, emptied of emotion by repetition in her own mind. "Marcus Chen, import-export consultant, or so I thought. He was investigating one of your shell companies. Someone found out. His body turned up in Itaewon with a Geomdo card in his pocket." Understanding flickered across Yoon-woo's face, followed by something that might have been regret in a man capable of such things. "The Southern District situation. Before my time as head of operations. I know. I've spent 8 months learning your organizational structure. You weren't responsible." Chloe opened her eyes, met his stare directly. "But someone in your syndicate was. Someone you trust. Someone who's still breathing your air and collecting your money. So you came for revenge." "I came for justice." She paused, tasting blood. "There's a difference. I needed to be close enough to find them, invisible enough that they'd never see me looking." Yoon-woo was quiet for a long moment, the gun still resting on his leg like a sleeping animal. "And my daughter?" "That was instinct," Chloe said. "Just instinct." The door opened so quietly that neither of them noticed at first. Haewon stood in the threshold wearing an oversized hoodie, her hair unbrushed, eyes swollen from crying. She looked younger than 16, and older than she should ever have to be. "Father," she said softly in Korean. Put the gun away. Yunwoo's jaw tightened, but he didn't move the weapon. This doesn't concern you. Go back to your room. It concerns me more than anyone. Hey. One stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her with the careful deliberation of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. She took 4 bullets meant for me. That makes it my business. Hey One. I knew. The words dropped like stones into still water. Both adults turned to stare at her. I knew she wasn't just a secretary. I've known for months. Chloe felt her pulse spike despite the morphine. Yunwoo's hand shifted on the gun. Explain, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that made lieutenants confess. Haewon moved to stand at the foot of Chloe's bed, positioning herself between her father and the wounded woman. 3 months ago, I came to the office late. I'd forgotten my literature textbook in the conference room. Everyone had gone home except the security team. She looked at Chloe, something like apology in her eyes. I saw you in Father's private office, reading files on his computer. Not scheduling files. Financial records, shipping manifests, personnel dossiers. The room became very still. Chloe could hear the machines monitoring her heartbeat accelerating, betraying her. You were so focused you didn't hear me. Haewon continued. I watched you for maybe 2 minutes. You were photographing documents with your phone, memorizing account numbers. I knew what I was seeing. I'm not stupid, even if everyone treats me like I am. Why didn't you tell me? Yunwoo's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. Nodded his daughter at himself, for underestimating everyone around him. Because I watched what she did after. Haewon's voice cracked slightly. She closed everything perfectly. Logged out, made it look untouched. Then she saw me standing there. We just looked at each other for maybe 10 seconds. And you know what she did? Neither of them answered. She asked me if I'd eaten dinner yet. Hey. Won's eyes glistened. Everyone else in this building treats me like an accessory, like a prop you bring out for photographs and put away when it's inconvenient. But she saw me. Actually saw me. She remembered that I hate seafood, that I have a history exam on Thursdays, that I prefer tea to coffee. She turned to her father, and there was steel beneath the tears. She's been the only person in this entire organization who treated me like a human being instead of a political asset. So when I saw her doing something she shouldn't, I made a choice. I kept quiet. That was foolish, Yunwoo said. No, Haewon replied. That was a debt. And tonight she paid hers. 4 bullets, father. She paid in blood. The door opened without warning, and Yo Haewon slipped inside like a thief in her own father's territory. She was still wearing the blood-stained red gown from the gala, now covered by an oversized hospital hoodie someone had given her. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair tangled, but her jaw was set with a determination that reminded Chloe uncomfortably of Yunwoo himself. You shouldn't be here, Yunwoo said, his voice sharp with paternal authority he rarely exercised. Security said you were resting in the family suite. Security doesn't tell me what to do. Hey. One moved to Chloe's bedside, ignoring her father entirely. Her small hand found Chloe's, careful to avoid the IV lines. I needed to see if she was awake, if she was okay. She's a spy, Yunwoo said flatly. She infiltrated our organization under false pretenses. I know. Hey. Won's voice was steady, though tears tracked fresh lines down her cheeks. I've known for 4 months. The silence that followed could have stopped hearts. Yunwoo rose slowly from his chair, the gun disappearing into his jacket with practiced ease. Explain now. Haewon turned to face him, still holding Chloe's hand. It was July. Late night I couldn't sleep. I came to your study to borrow a book, and found her at your desk with files spread everywhere. Security files. Financial records. Things she shouldn't have been touching. She looked back at Chloe. She saw me immediately, didn't even try to lie about it, just asked if I was going to tell you. Chloe remembered that night with crystalline clarity, the terror of being caught, the calculation of whether a 16-year-old girl counted as a witness who needed silencing, the decision that had shaped everything since. Why didn't you? Yunwoo's voice was dangerous now. Why would you protect someone investigating your own family? Because she was the only one who treated me like a person. The words came out raw, years of loneliness compressed into a single accusation. She remembered my birthday when you forgot. She asked about my entrance exams when you were too busy. She learned the name of my favorite author so she could surprise me with a signed copy. Haewon's grip tightened on Chloe's hand. For 8 months, the spy showed me more kindness than my own father. Yoonwoo flinched as if struck. It was the first genuine wound Chloe had seen him take. I told her I'd keep her secret, Haewon continued, if she promised not to hurt you. Not to hurt our family. She gave me her word. The girl's voice cracked. And tonight she proved it. She took 4 bullets meant for me. So whatever you think she owes you, father, you owe her more. The machines monitoring Chloe's vitals beeped steadily in the heavy silence. Somewhere beyond the private room, the hospital hummed with ordinary emergencies. But here, in this space between violence and family, debt was being calculated in currencies that had nothing to do with money. Yoonwoo looked at his daughter, truly looked at her perhaps for the first time in months. Then at Chloe. Then at the space between them where loyalty had grown in the garden of his own neglect. Get some rest, Haewon, he said finally, his voice emptied of its earlier edge. We'll discuss this later. But the damage was done. The truth had been spoken. And everyone in the room knew that some debts couldn't be discussed away. 3 days later, Chloe walked into the Jeomdo boardroom with stitches still holding her chest together and enough painkillers in her system to tranquilize a horse. The tailored black suit Yoonwoo had sent to her hospital room fit perfectly, though the fabric pressed against her bandages like a constant reminder of what she'd survived. Each step was calculated agony disguised as confidence. The executive table fell silent. 8 lieutenants, men who'd watched her fetch coffee and disappear for 8 months, now stared as if she'd risen from a grave they'd assumed was sealed. Park, the head of security, looked like he'd swallowed glass. Mrs. Beck's expression could have frozen rivers. Yoonwoo sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled, watching his subordinates process the impossible. When Chloe took the empty chair to his right, the seat reserved for the underboss, vacant since the previous occupant had been found in the Han River, the silence shattered. What is this? Park demanded in Korean, rising from his chair. This is a joke. Tell me this is a joke. Sit down, Yoonwoo said quietly. The command carried the weight of absolute authority. Park remained standing. She's a secretary. Park caught himself, but everyone heard the word he'd swallowed. She has no business in this room. No experience. No family ties. No what? Chloe interrupted in flawless Korean, her voice steady despite the fire in her ribs. No credentials? No loyalty? Or were you going to say no right to be here because of what I look like? Park's face flushed crimson. You don't understand our organization, our culture. This position requires 6 years of tactical operations experience. Chloe leaned back carefully, maintaining eye contact. Fluency in Korean, Mandarin, Japanese, and Russian. The ability to identify a security vulnerability your entire team missed 3 days ago? She let the words land. Or did you mean it requires something I can't change about myself? Gentlemen, Yoonwoo cut through the rising tension. Miss Winslet saved my daughter's life while 8 of you stood with your weapons holstered. She identified the threat. She neutralized the immediate danger. She took 4 bullets that were meant for Haewon. His gaze swept the table like a blade. Where were your credentials in that moment? This is madness, Lieutenant Kim spoke up, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. She's been here 8 months. We've bled for this organization for decades. You can't elevate an outsider and American to second in command based on one act of heroism, Chloe offered. The word you're looking for is heroism. Stupidity, Kim snapped. Anyone can throw themselves in front of a bullet. It doesn't make you qualified to run operations. Mrs. Beck's voice cut through, cold and precise. There are protocols, Mr. Yoon. Traditions. The families won't accept this. A woman, a foreigner, with no understanding of our ways. Your ways left my daughter bleeding on a ballroom floor, Yoonwoo said, his voice dropping to a register that made the air itself feel dangerous. Your protocols failed. Your traditions were too busy enjoying champagne to notice an assassin with a clear shot. Park slammed his fist on the table. I won't serve under her. I won't take orders from... Then leave. Yoonwoo's words were final as a coffin closing. The boardroom door opened without permission, and Min Seoyeon entered like winter itself had taken human form. She was the head of the Baeko family, one of the three powers that kept Seoul's underworld in delicate equilibrium with Gyeongdo. Her reputation preceded her like a knife, ruthless, calculating, and untouchable since she'd inherited her late husband's empire and tripled its reach within 2 years. She wore white a power move in a room full of men dressed in black. Her heels clicked against marble with metronomic precision as she approached the table, flanked by 2 bodyguards who looked like they'd been carved from granite. "Yoon Woo," she said, her voice carrying the false warmth of a diplomat addressing an enemy. "I heard you were having internal difficulties. I thought I should pay my respects." Her eyes slid to Chloe, lingering with predatory interest. "And meet your new underboss. How progressive." "This is a private meeting, Seon." Yoonwoo's tone suggested she should leave. His posture suggested he knew she wouldn't. "I have information about the attack at the Skylight Gala." Seoyeon produced a tablet from her Hermes bag, placing it on the table with theatrical precision. "Information you'll want to see before you make any more personnel decisions you can't undo." She tapped the screen. A bank transfer materialized 2 million won, paid 3 days before the gala to an account registered to the shooter. The source account was masked, but the routing information was visible. Someone had been careless or perhaps arrogant. The payment originated from a shell company in the Caymans. Seoyeon continued, circling the table like a shark scenting blood. "A company that, interestingly, was established 8 months ago, the same week your new secretary started her employment." She looked directly at Chloe. Quite the coincidence. Park leaned forward, his earlier rage transforming into vindication. "I knew it. She's been playing us from the beginning." "The evidence suggests Miss Winslet hired the assassin herself," Seoyeon said, her voice silk over steel. "A false flag operation. Take the bullets, earn your trust, position herself at your right hand. Classic intelligence tradecraft. The CIA must be very proud." Chloe felt the room's energy shift, predatory attention focusing on her like crosshairs. Even Eunwoo's expression had hardened, calculating odds and betrayals. She forced herself to remain still despite the pain screaming through her torso, despite the trap closing around her with the precision of a master tactician. "That's an interesting theory," Chloe said carefully. "But the shell company isn't mine." "Then whose?" Seoyeon's smile was a scalpel. "You're the intelligence professional. You tell me who had the means, the motive, and the access to arrange an assassination at a charity gala where Gyeongdo's security protocols were mysteriously inadequate." She paused for effect. "Unless you're suggesting someone else in this room wanted Haewon dead." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Every lieutenant at the table was now a suspect or an ally, and no one was certain which. Lieutenant Kim stood abruptly. "This woman has infiltrated our organization under false pretenses. The evidence speaks for itself. She should be detained immediately until..." "Until what?" Haewon's voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. Haewon stood in the doorway wearing her school uniform, her presence so unexpected that several lieutenants actually reached for weapons before remembering she was the boss's daughter. Her eyes were red-rimmed but fierce, and she walked into the boardroom with the kind of reckless courage that only comes from having nothing left to lose. "Haewon, this isn't..." Eunwoo began, but his daughter cut him off with a look that could have been his own. "Chloe wasn't sent by the CIA," Haewon said, her voice trembling but determined. "She was sent by my mother." The silence that followed was absolute. Eunwoo's late wife was sacred ground, a subject no one dared traverse. She died 4 years ago in a car accident that everyone suspected wasn't an accident at all, though no one had ever proven otherwise. "What are you talking about?" Eunwoo's voice was barely above a whisper. Haewon moved to stand beside Chloe's chair, her small hand finding the back of it for support. "Before she died, my mother knew I'd be in danger. She knew that being your daughter made me a target." Her words came faster now, the lie gaining momentum. "She made arrangements. Secret arrangements, because she didn't trust your security team to actually protect me instead of just protecting their positions." Park's face had gone pale. "That's impossible. We would have known." "Would you?" Haewon turned on him with sudden venom. "You didn't even notice an assassin walk past you 3 days ago. You didn't see him aim a gun at my head. But Chloe did. She looked at Seo-yeon with barely disguised contempt. My mother hired her through private channels, paid her through accounts you'd never find because they were meant to be invisible, just like Chloe was meant to be invisible. Hae-won, Chloe said quietly, understanding the magnitude of what the girl was doing. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Hey. Won's voice cracked but didn't break. My mother told me before she died that if anything happened, someone would come. Someone who would watch over me when father was too busy building his empire. She turned to Yoon-woo, tears streaming now. She told me to look for a woman who didn't belong, who everyone would underestimate. She said that's how I'd know she was the right one. This is absurd, Lieutenant Kim protested. A convenient story with no way to verify. My mother kept a safety deposit box, Hae-won interrupted, at Worry Bank in Gangnam, box number 847. I have the key. She pulled a small brass key from her pocket. God knew where she'd actually gotten it and placed it on the table. The paperwork is there, the original contract, the payment records, everything. It was a masterful lie, Chloe realized with something close to awe. Specific enough to be credible, vague enough to be difficult to immediately disprove. And it exploited the one emotional vulnerability Yoon-woo had, his guilt over his late wife. Seo-yeon's expression had shifted from triumph to calculation. How touching, the dead wife's final gift. Though I have to wonder why this information is only surfacing now, after evidence of Miss Winslet's true background has come to light. Because I didn't think I needed to explain it, Hae-won said, her voice gaining strength from the rage underneath. Because Chloe was doing exactly what she was supposed to do, staying invisible, staying close, keeping me safe. Until she had to step in front of 4 bullets while your father's expensive security team stood around like furniture. Chloe watched the room's attention pivot between Hae-won's desperate performance and Seo-yeon's calculating skepticism. The chaos was perfect cover, exactly the kind of distraction she'd been trained to exploit. Her mind raced through 8 months of memorized data account numbers glimpsed over shoulders, shipping manifests left carelessly open, financial transfers discussed while she was treated like ambient noise. And there it was, the pattern she'd been too focused on her own mission to fully recognize until this moment. Lieutenant Kim, Chloe said, her voice cutting through the argument like a scalpel. You've been very vocal about my lack of credentials, very concerned about tradition and protocols. Kim's eyes narrowed. What's your point? My point is that for someone so concerned about organizational security, you've been remarkably sloppy with your personal finances. Chloe kept her tone conversational despite the pain radiating through her chest. The shell company Seo-yeon mentioned? It's not mine. But I recognize the routing structure. It matches the pattern of 17 other accounts I've seen in the past 8 months. You're deflecting, Kim said. But something flickered behind his eyes. Fear, maybe. Or the calculation of someone caught between fight and flight. Account GK2847 at Hana Bank, Chloe continued, pulling numbers from memory with the precision of a surgical strike. Registered to a holding company in Singapore. You used it to pay off your gambling debts in Macau, 3 million won in March alone. I know because I filed the expense reports that covered your business trip. Park leaned forward. How would you know his personal? Because I was invisible, Chloe said simply. Because Lieutenant Kim left his banking statements on the conference table while he went to take a call. Because he discussed his Macau contacts in this very room while I was refilling water glasses. She looked directly at Kim. Because people don't guard their secrets around furniture. Kim's face had drained of color. This is ridiculous. She's making up numbers to save herself. Account GK2847, Chloe repeated. Want me to tell everyone what the GK stands for? Jeomdo Korea. You've been siphoning funds through dummy accounts for at least 2 years, maybe longer. Small amounts, carefully structured to avoid audits. Except you got greedy. The gambling debts piled up. And someone noticed. Who? Yoon-woo's voice was winter itself. Ask Seo-yeon, Chloe said, watching the other woman's expression carefully. She didn't come here with that evidence because she's concerned about Jeomdo's internal security. She came here because Lieutenant Kim has been her asset for months, maybe years. And when he failed to kill Hae-won at the gala, She decided to cut her losses and frame me instead. Seo-yeon's smile didn't waver, but her eyes had gone flat and cold. That's quite a story. No proof, of course. Just the desperate accusations of a cornered spy. The proof is in Kim's accounts, Chloe said. The ones he thinks are hidden. But I can give you the numbers right now. Every single one. Because I've been watching him for 8 months, memorizing every careless mistake he made while he looked right through me. Kim was on his feet now, hand moving toward his jacket. Park moved faster, his gun clearing leather and leveling at Kim's chest before the lieutenant could draw his own weapon. The boardroom erupted into controlled chaos, weapons drawn, alliances recalculating in real time. Don't, Park said quietly. For once, he and Chloe were on the same side. Lieutenant Kim made his move too late and too desperately. His hand barely touched his weapon before Park's bullet shattered his kneecap, dropping him to the marble floor with a scream that echoed off the boardroom's glass walls. 2 more of Yunwoo's men had him pinned within seconds, his face pressed against the floor where Chloe's blood had pooled 3 days earlier. Seo-yeon watched the scene unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a chess game that had stopped being interesting. How unfortunate, she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. I suppose I should take my leave before this becomes messier than it already is. You're not going anywhere, Yunwoo said quietly. His hand rested on the table, fingers drumming once, twice. A signal. The boardroom doors locked with an audible click. Seo-yeon's bodyguards tensed but didn't draw. They were outnumbered 4-1, and everyone in the room knew it. You orchestrated an attack on my daughter. Yunwoo continued, rising from his chair with the slow deliberation of a man deciding between execution and war. Used one of my own men to do it. That requires a response. Seo-yeon's smile never faltered. Prove it. My organization will stand behind me. This will trigger a conflict that will cost us all more than you're willing to pay. She glanced at Chloe. Unless you'd prefer to let your new underboss handle negotiations. She seems resourceful. The standoff hung in the air, sharp and unstable. Then Yunwoo did something unexpected. He looked at Chloe, truly looked at her, not through her, and asked a question that felt like a grenade with the pin pulled. What do you want? Chloe met his gaze, aware that every person in the room was calculating her answer, weighing her value against their own survival. I want access, she said simply. Complete access to your organization's files from 2 years ago. Southern District operations, personnel records, financial transactions, everything. To find your fiancé's killer, Unwoo said. Not a question. Yes. Park spoke up, his gun still trained on the bleeding Kim. You're going to give an American spy full access to our records? After everything, she took 4 bullets for my daughter while the rest of you stood watching. Yunwoo said, his voice carrying the weight of a decision already made. After everything, she identified the traitor in this room when none of you saw him. He turned back to Chloe. You get your access. You find your killer. And in exchange, you serve as my underboss, legitimately. No more invisible games. No more pretending to be something you're not. And if the person who killed Marcus is someone you value? Chloe asked. Someone important to your operations? Yunwoo's expression was unreadable. Then we'll discuss justice versus stability when the time comes. But you'll have the truth. That's more than most people get in this world. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a transaction between 2 people who'd both learned that survival required uncomfortable alliances. Chloe extended her hand, ignoring the pain the movement caused. Yunwoo took it, his grip firm and deliberate. To fragile alliances, Chloe said. And honest enemies, Yunwoo replied, glancing at Seo-yeon. Get her out of my building. As Seo-yeon was escorted out with poisonous grace, Haewon appeared at Chloe's side again, her hand finding Chloe's arm with the desperate relief of someone who'd just watched everything nearly fall apart. The girl said nothing, but her grip spoke volumes about debts paid and lives saved and the strange mathematics of loyalty. Chloe had come to Jeumdo Tower 8 months ago as a ghost seeking vengeance. She was leaving this boardroom as something far more dangerous. A woman with power, access, and nothing left to lose. The game had changed, and this time everyone would see her coming.